Virtual summits are the most powerful online marketing tool available to grow your list, launch your platform, make more money, and create an impact in the world, even if you're just getting started. If you are ready to take your summit to the next level, then tune into the Virtual Summit podcast with Dr. Mark T. Wade.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark T. Wade, founder of Virtual Summit Software and creator of the One Day Summit Formula. And I'm on a mission to help you, the summit host, get your summit out to the world in a powerful and impactful way. So let's get started. Hey, Summit host, Dr. Mark T. Wade here, founder of Virtual Summit Software and your host on the Virtual Summit podcast. So I am excited for today's episode. We are going to be getting into some speaker success tips, both on how you can recruit speakers for you Summit hosts out there, and also how you can get on more summits for you Summit speakers out there. I have legendary Carol Lourie with me, CEO of Natural Healthcare and Healing. She's worked with thousands of women over the last 35 years. She also studied with oncology expert Donnie Yance, founder of Metairie Foundation. She's been a guest speaker on countless of summits, and she's going to be providing us with some of that amazing wisdom here today. Thank you so much for being with us here, Carol. So
I am so honored and excited to be here.
It's going to be a blast, and I'm sure that our summit hosts are in for an absolute treat. Carol is an absolute genius in the healthcare space, but she speaks across the board on summits. So we're going to be picking your mind today, Carol, on some of those speaker success tips for our hosts and our speakers out there. So why don't we start off first, before we actually dive into the summit talk? Why don't you tell our audience just a little bit about you so they kind of know your background?
Love to. I'm a naturopath, I'm an acupuncturist, I'm a homeopath, which a lot of people don't really understand the beauty and the power of homeopathy. So maybe I'll talk about that for a little bit. And I'm a functional medicine expert, and I have a clinical practice in Berkeley, California. And in the last 5 or 7 years, I've expanded into the internet world through our Mindshare community. And in order to bring my wonderful love of integrative healing to women with breast cancer, I've created an online healing program called thepathofbreastcancer.com, where we can use a self-guided method to provide the integrative tools that women need to have a more positive outcome with less toxic side effects from standard medical oncology. So I incorporate both methods. I have a phrase, it's called, it takes two. Like it takes two to tango, it takes two to thrive through breast cancer.
Such a great background there. I mean, you got just about everything. I think you checked the list on almost everything there with the healthcare professional. And I'm also going to let everybody know listening in, everything that Carol's talking about today, everything we get into on this episode, you can find over at the show notes, which is podcast.virtualsummits.com/061. So go check out what Carol's got going on outside of the virtual summit world as well. There's some really good stuff there. So now as we dive into the virtual summit aspect, Carol, can we hear a little bit about your experience from the virtual summit world? I know you ran a summit, so just briefly mention that, and then let us know about your experience speaking on summits.
I think having experience in both angles is really important. When you see a summit on the internet, unless you've been on the back end, you don't realize all the tiny, tiny little details that go into creating a summit, number one, and how you have to have somebody who has expertise in marketing it, in creating the graphics, in dealing with the affiliates, and getting the affiliates to send out. It's a very complicated machine. So with my summit, which was several years ago, unfortunately, it was my first experience in the world of the internet and the summits, and I didn't understand all of the complexities of the back end, and therefore it wasn't marketed as the way it should have been. And everything in the internet world, as in life, is a learning experience. So this was a big learning experience for me about how critical marketing and the back end of what we do is. And I am computer challenged. I realize that's not one of my assets. So I make sure that I have a team that can really handle my back end material that is so critical.
It's time to up-level your summit game and interview like a pro. No one wants to listen to 20 to 30 hours of boring interviews. The summit interview is one of the most important aspects of your summit. And now you can get some free training over at interviewlikeapro.com. That's interviewlikeapro.com. Your audience will thank you and your speakers will love you. Let's commit to no more boring interviews. It's time to interview with impact. It's so true. And any of us who've been in the virtual summit space long enough have had bombed summits. I know I've had several bombed summits over the course of my career, but it's all about learning, adjusting, and improving. Now, you've spoken on quite a few summits. Can you kind of tell us what's the main reason you decide to continue to speak on these summits, both from obviously a goodwill perspective, but also from a business perspective?
Well, I think the goodwill is really important. I don't want to diminish that. Everyone needs to start someplace, and we're all trying to bring our message out there. And there is a tendency, I think, to once you reach a certain high level to be sort of a summit snob. You're only going to be on a certain summit with certain high level people. And I think that's very unfortunate. I like to support everyone, no matter where they are. And it's not easy to break into those upper levels. It takes a lot of time and insight and money and commitment. And I like to support people. I like to be really generous. So I usually say yes, unless it's something that I absolutely know nothing about. Like if you'd asked me to be on an engineering summit, I would say no, thank you. But anything in the health field that I have expertise or experience with, I'm happy to say yes to. I like to support people. And I think the goodwill goes a long way energetically in being a success in yourself and in the world and getting your message out. And as far as what appeals to me in a summit, I like to know what the topic is, that the host or hostess has a really clear idea about how they are bringing value to the world with their program, and that it has clear idea of what the problem is and what's the emotional or the pain points of the problem, and then how can we solve the problem from a functional medicine or root cause perspective, because that's my approach, which is the root cause. I'm not like the Band-Aid girl. I'm the get underneath there and dig girl to find out what the problem is. And that is what I believe is true healing.
I love this. I think I'm going to hashtag this as a new phrase now, or at least I'm going to make it an ongoing phrase. Summit snobs. That was great. You have me chuckling over here. So,
okay, good.
I'm going to dig a little bit deeper in with you on this from the business perspective. So what are some of the benefits that you've seen happen to you, maybe your influence or your business from speaking on these summits?
Well, initially there is that increase of your list size. But unfortunately, I think that is short-lived, because you have to really take care of your list. And a lot of people who get on your list from summits want free stuff and aren't interested in true healing. So the list size can be a misnomer, I think, from being on summits. I think the exposure is a really important component of being on summits, and I can't stress that enough. I think people knowing your name and knowing what your expertise is and knowing that you're generous in person and willing to help out is really important. So I think that's almost more important than list size, because the list, I haven't seen a big return from increasing my list from being on summit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually talk very specifically in some of the strategies we teach. We actually talk about the one-day summit and how it's important to build an engaged and qualified list versus just building a big list of people that are maybe tire kickers or not qualified. So this is another great point of that. And I like the exposure aspect, because I know I've seen it. A lot of our other summit speakers, they say that just from being kind of on these summits, you're kind of everywhere. And people just, they start to get that kind of either brand or name recognition, which is really important, especially for even more opportunities. So I love that aspect. When we go with let's kind of dive a little bit into the recruitment process, because not every speaker has that kind of big heart that you have, Carol, the supportive, I'm going to support you because, we all have to start somewhere and move up. So how can we find more summit speakers like yourself? Like, what would be the best way when we're like trying to find speakers for our summits to find you hidden gems that are maybe out there, not necessarily you, but the other hidden gems that are out there that are not necessarily on every summit, but would be good to have them on the summit? What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Well, if you go someplace like Mindshare, I think when you're in a room with almost 1,000 people, it is a really good opportunity to approach somebody individually and introduce yourself and say, I know you're an expert in topic A. I want to put together a summit. Would you be? I think there's a lot that personal one-to-one is really important. Or I was referred by so-and-so who's your friend who I know. It's the cold calling thing or the cold email thing is very difficult. And we all get a ton of emails. And sometimes it's hard, no matter how dedicated you are, you can spend hours going through your emails every day. And it gets to be really diminishing of your time and your ability to get things done during a day. So I think I was referred by so-and-so, even in the subject line, or meeting people one-on-one at events such as Mindshare is really important.
Yeah, you really nailed it right there. The fact of having a warm intro for a summit or essentially anything is so, so important. And I like this idea. We haven't actually talked about this before, using live events to kind of build that network, to build those relationships, knowing in advance maybe that you have these kind of things, these projects or these summits coming. For example, if you're a podcaster and you want to do something in the podcast space, Podcast Movement would be one of those places that you're going to go to, and you're going to meet all these successful entrepreneurs that are in podcasting that you could have on your summit. Or, if you're in the launch space, maybe you're going to Jeff Walker's LaunchCon or Traffic and Conversion with Ryan Dice. So there's all these different events that we can go to in your niche to start building these relationships, which is the name of the game, right, Carol? It's about relationships.
And it's also about being prepared. So if you go to LaunchCon or Mindshare or Traffic and Conversion, if you think that you want to do something in the following year, you have your list and you just make sure you meet those people. You don't make it in the world if you're passive. You really have to have that inner connection and inner determination and fire to move forward, to bring yourself and your message forward. You have to believe in your message, or else that's the driving force, because it's not always easy. You have to stay connected to yourself.
I love that. One of my taglines is your message matters. And if you're not connected and at least, behind your own message, how are you going to get out there in front of more people? So great point. Let's keep diving into now. Well, a little bit shift. Let's go into like the actual interviews that are happening on Summit. So first, let's get some speaker success tips from you, Carol. Like for our speakers out there that are going to be speaking on a summit, what are some success tips that they need to be thinking about, either from preparation or just making sure that they do get their message across effectively?
Well, I think you said the key word, which is preparation. So you need to be prepared and you need to practice. Some people have this tendency to say, every few words. Some people have a tendency to say, So you need to practice in front of the mirror, and you need to learn how not to say, or all the time. And it is a skill set. So when you see somebody up on the stage or in television really presenting themselves well, they didn't learn how to do that in a day. They practiced. And we have people in our community who teach you how to do that. So I think you need to be willing to take courses to learn how to get better in yourself. And there is a spiritual journey for yourself in this field, not just what you're wanting to bring out to people in the audience.
It's time to up-level your summit game and interview like a pro. No one wants to listen to 20 to 30 hours of boring interviews. The summit interview is one of the most important aspects of your summit. And now you can get some free training over at interviewlikeapro.com. That's interviewlikeapro.com. Your audience will thank you and your speakers will love you. Let's commit to no more boring interviews. It's time to interview with impact. So true right there. And I love that. You got to practice it. I mean, how many people, I know so many people are out there, they have things that they talk about, but they don't actually practice it. And how many of you summit hosts out there who have spoken on summits have gone back and actually listened to your own presentation? I love this, Carol. This is great advice. So what, other than practicing, like, let's maybe walk us through one of your kind of routines or something you do if you're going to be putting on maybe a new presentation, although it's the content that you're the expert on. What are some things you're thinking about to make sure that it's going to either connect with the audience or get your message across clearly? Let's assume we're going to practice it, but what are a couple other kind of ideas or suggestions?
Well, I always start with the pain point or a problem, and I try to tell a story in the beginning. I've been through enough of these meetings where you're given information on how to do this, so you don't really need to reinvent the wheel. And I think it's important when you're with experts, if they tell you to move 2 inches to the right, you move 2 inches to the right. I tend to listen to people who have come before me. I do not feel like I need to reinvent the wheel. So you need to get your ego out of the way and think you know how to do it better, because there are people who do know how to do it and they're already successful at that. And I think that's really important. So I practice. I think about, if I'm in the audience, and it depends who the audience is, how am I going to be feeling? Have I listened to a lot of people before, and am I boring? Do I want to start out with a light story, or do I want to bring people in emotionally right away? And I try to make them as if they're sitting in my office, and I make it one-to-one, because that's where I really excel at. And that way I'm not nervous. I'm just talking to one person who's in pain and needs my help. And that just catapults me forward really easily.
It's so true. And we kind of get off track if we're starting to think, oh, I'm talking to this huge group or trying to talk to everybody. Like, I always talk about niching down and how important it is with your message. And if you're talking to that one person in front of you, it makes it so much easier. Excellent. So let's go through the little bit of the interview process, because you've been on a lot of summits, and I'm sure you've had some hosts that were not the best interviewers in the world. So of course you're not going to say any names, but let's talk through because our hosts are sitting out there. Most of them have not had any kind of interview training. What are some of those kind of skills, or at least things that you've noticed, that kind of make the difference between a really good interview and maybe a not so good interview?
Well, I like the interviews that are more conversational, where somebody says A and then it's followed up with B, and somebody says C and then it's followed up with D. I think there are two different types of interviews. There's that, and then there's a more structured interview where the host asks questions, and they're the same questions to everybody. And when I did my summit, that's what I did. It was the same questions to everyone, and I would not do that again. I mean, I've morphed and changed. It's been a while, and I think you get better at what you do. Every time you flop, you get better, and you just keep getting better and better. And hopefully we all learn from our flops and our lessons. And so when you see somebody out there who's really great at what they do, and their success looks like, oh my God, it like happened overnight. It wasn't an overnight thing. There were many hours and weeks and months of them consistently just plugging away at it to get to that level. And it's important for all of us to remember that, because it's very easy to get into an envy state of, oh, they're so great and I'm never going to be able to get there. And they worked hard for their success and they deserve it, just like you are and you want.
It's so true. And you have to practice too. It goes on and on with practice. Like, I think the interview aspect of summits is one of our weakest links right now in the virtual summit world. We actually have an entire program called Interview with Impact. It's helping summit hosts actually improve that right there. So I'm a big believer in that, and that we have to practice that and increase our skill level with that. So if a summit host were to reach out to you, let's say they've done the interview with you, and they're a new summit host, they haven't had any kind of interview training or whatnot, what would be the best way for them to kind of reach out to you to get some feedback, and how would that be the best way to structure it? The reason I ask that is because I know when people reach out to me for help, I want them to be really clear with how they reach out. I don't want them to say, hey, Mark, can you help me? Tell me how I can be better. Way too generic. What would be your kind of suggestion for summit hosts when they reach out and ask for help?
I actually think that somebody calling you or emailing you or having a conversation and saying, I wasn't satisfied with our interview and I'm wondering if you could give me feedback, I think that's fine. There are so many, first of all, I like that you have I think interviewing is a skill set, and I like that you provide that. And I want to encourage everyone who is doing summit interviews to really get Mark's program, because I'm sure it's excellent. I haven't seen it, but it is a skill set. You don't know what you don't know until you start doing it and you don't do it well. And then you realize, oh, I could have done that better. So we all need to get better at whatever it is that we're doing. I think calling somebody up and being really honest and saying, I wasn't really satisfied with our interview and I want to know what your experience was. And can you tell me what I could have done better? I don't think there's anything the matter. I would be fine with somebody talking to me like that. It's honest and it's from the heart. And I don't think there's anything inappropriate about that.
Yeah. So inappropriate or not aside, like how would you go forward with that? How would you help them with that?
Sorry. Yes, of course. I would be honest. I would say, well, some of the questions we didn't follow up. We didn't follow linearly. It was all over the place. Or you could have been a little bit more prepared about asking me some of my questions that would have provided value for your community. I think that's about it. It's complicated. Here I'm going with and so this is, it's complicated.
Right.
It depends on what the experience was. I haven't really had a horrible interview, luckily. I've had not great interviews, but I've never had a really horrible interview. I think if I was in the middle of a horrible interview, I might ask the person to stop the recording and try to fix the problem. I mean, if it was that bad, I would say, can we stop, please? I think we need to have a conversation about what's happening here.
That's impressive. That's some confidence right there too. And to clarify as well for everybody listening, as somebody who gets at least 20 to 30 messages a day from people saying, Mark, can you help me with whatever? The best way I'm going to recommend for you to reach out to somebody to ask for help is come with a specific agenda, a specific guideline. I don't have the time to think of what you're trying to think of to answer your question. So if you reach out to somebody who's in an influencer position like Carol, like myself, or others, come to them with a couple specific points. Like, hey, can you help me? What did you think about my intro? And could my interview questions have been better? Versus, how can I be better? Because those generic questions, most of us, we just don't have time to think about or figure out what you were thinking in that process. So clarity.
I think
Clarity and being specific is super, super important in those instances.
Thank you, Mark. That's a really good point. I wasn't thinking about that, but I can imagine someone in your position gets a lot of requests, and it's sort of like somebody calling me up and say, I'm not feeling well. Can you help me? And I go, okay. So, then I have to go through 15 questions to get down to the fact that they had Lyme disease and now they have breast cancer. They've never been well since. So it's a good point. Thank you for that. Yes. I think that's the more specific you can be with your questions, the easier it is for the person you're asking for help from. So I learned something just now. Thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And I'm learning a lot too. So this is going great. What I would love to actually kind of dive into a little bit now is kind of maybe like the closing aspect of the session, like of when you're doing your presentation. Most summits don't let the speakers sell something on the summit. That's just the generic. So we'll stick in that category because that affects the most people. But usually they let you offer something like, hey, go check out my guide or go see my website. Like, what have you found in your experience to be one of the better things to give away? From more of is it better to send them to social media? When you're doing your presentation, is it better to send the audience social media, to your website, give a free gift? If so, what kind of gift do you give?
I think a free gift is best, because that way, and it has to be a free gift that's relevant and has value. Because that way you gather the person's email address and then they go through your lead magnet email sequence and they have to opt in to receive the gift. I think that is the best method. Social media, it's great that they know who you are, but unless your social media specifically relates to them, it's just a 2-second moment. I think the free gift of value with the lead magnet and then the email sequence is really important. And you have to know if your email sequence is converting or if they're even opening. There's all that back end stuff. And I'm not a computer person, but I'm really into the back end stuff. So I really follow it. And I think that that's how we learn and get better.
It's time to up-level your summit game and interview like a pro. No one wants to listen to 20 to 30 hours of boring interviews. The summit interview is one of the most important aspects of your summit. And now you can get some free training over at interviewlikeapro.com. That's interviewlikeapro.com. Your audience will thank you and your speakers will love you. Let's commit to no more boring interviews. It's time to interview with impact. This is such an important point. I want to make sure everybody listened, heard that, and noted that. Whether you're a summit speaker ongoing or you're even a host speaking on your summit, it's better to give a free gift. But like Carol just said, you got to make sure the back end converts, or really you're just wasted a really important opportunity. This is such an important note right here. So test your email sequence, test your funnel, test the back end out, and then make sure you're offering something that's of value, like Carol just said. So as we kind of wrap this up now, Carol, I'd love for you to kind of leave our summit hosts, our aspiring summit hosts, and our summit speakers with kind of like just some parting pieces of wisdom. What would you tell them if they're sitting out there thinking like, man, I don't know if this whole virtual summit thing's for me. Like it seems too complex or whatnot. Like maybe give them just a little bit of inspiration and parting wisdom.
One, I think you should absolutely go for it. It's a really great way of bringing yourself forward into the community and putting yourself out there. And in 2016, there was $1.6 billion spent on internet courses. That was 3 years ago already. So I'm sure that in 2019, it's closer to $2.5 billion. I have to look this up. But that's a lot of money. And I think the world of the internet is only getting bigger in healthcare. That's my field. I can only speak to my field. I don't know anything about technology or anything else. I know that in healthcare, it's only getting bigger. And there are lots of doctors who are giving up their clinical practice and just doing virtual, which is a different topic entirely. But in the world of healthcare, people are getting more sophisticated and don't want to leave their homes. And your value of your message has the ability to reach, like in my community, I'm reaching people in Australia, New Zealand, Wales, Malta, Ireland, Scotland, England, US and Canada. I mean, any country that speaks English, my program hasn't been translated yet. So you have the ability to reach people all over the world, which is pretty phenomenal. I think that's an amazing gift. So I encourage you to go for it, but also to realize that 1, is going to take more time than you thought. 2, is going to take more of your energy. 3, sometimes it will be very stressful. 4, you must handle the back end. You must. I can't stress that enough, because otherwise you'll have spent all this time and money and it will flop. Learn from my expense and my mistake. Don't do that. I mean, that was a big learning thing for me, and I'm never going to make that mistake again. And surround yourself with a staff or, contractors who believe in you and they're pleasant to work with, and go out and get the people that you want. Aim high. Like, don't be afraid to say, oh, that person's not going to want to talk to me. Just forget that. Just assume they're going to want to talk to you and go for who you want, and don't take no for an answer. Just go for it. And that's my words of wisdom.
Amazing words of wisdom right there. Carol, you're an absolute rock star, a summit hero. We are so fortunate to have you on here. Before we wrap it up, I'd love for you to just tell the audience what's the best way they can follow up with you, and where do you hang out at?
Well, I am in social media, as Mark suggested, but the best way to reach me is through my my sales page of my wonderful Path of Breast Cancer course. It's thepathofbreastcancer.com. That's what I'm focusing on in my exterior practice, also my interior practice, my clinical practice. I'm working with women with breast cancer, providing integrative tools to help their journey. So that is the best way to reach me.
And we all know somebody out there who is suffering or has
Yes.
suffered from breast cancer. So take that resource right there, share it out, use it yourself, check it out. Also, all of that information and everything else we've talked about is going to be on the show notes at podcast.virtualsummits.com/061. Thank you again, Carol. Absolute rock star. Thank you to all you Summit hosts listening in here on today's episode. I'm Dr. Mark T. Wade, founder of Virtual Summit Software. And remember, your message matters. Be sure to check out the show notes, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. Now don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on the Virtual Summit podcast. Head over to the show notes to check out all the links and resources from this episode, and be sure to grab your free trial of the Virtual Summit software.
Now, I want to end this episode by saying to all the Summit hosts listening right now, I believe in you, and you can do this. Summits are by far one of the most powerful ways to quickly grow your list, launch your platform, make more money, and most importantly, make an impact in the world, even if you're just getting started. So don't get caught up in analysis paralysis, because the world needs to hear your message, and there are people who are waiting for you to help them. So just get started, because imperfect action is always better than no action. Thank you, and see you on the next episode.